The Charleston heat hung in the air like a damp, suffocating blanket, even after the sun had dipped below the rooftops of the historic district. Inside the quiet, three-story house on Trad Street, the air was cool and still, but the silence between Ethan and Clara was not. It had a weight to it, a heaviness that pressed in on Ethan from all sides. He sat in his study, a room filled with the scent of old paper and leather-bound books, the kind of room that should have been his sanctuary. But tonight, he couldn't focus. A half-read article on antebellum architecture lay forgotten on his desk, his mind replaying the hushed tones of a phone call he'd overheard just minutes ago. Clara had been in the living room, ostensibly on a call with a client. Her voice, usually so bright and full of a warm, southern cadence, had been different. It was a low, conspiratorial murmur, laced with a laugh that felt alien to him. The laugh wasn't for him. She had paused, and then he heard her say, "I'll call you later. He's here." The words were a physical blow. The "he" was him, and the urgency in her voice was undeniable. She'd hung up the phone so quickly it made a small, sharp click that echoed through the otherwise silent house. He had walked into the living room a moment later. Clara was scrolling through her phone, her thumb moving with an unnatural speed. She looked up at him, her smile a little too wide, a little too practiced. "Just a client," she said, her voice a little breathless. "They're trying to change the design plan last minute. It's always something, right?" Ethan had just nodded, but a cold, hard knot had formed in his stomach. He'd known her for 12 years, married for 10. He knew her lies as well as he knew her truths, and that one was a lie. The scent of her perfume, a new one he didn't recognize, seemed to fill the room, a fragrant, foreign thing in their familiar space. He watched her now from his doorway. She was still on the couch, her phone in her hand, the screen glowing in the half-light. She looked beautiful, dressed in a sleek black dress she hadn't worn in years, her hair meticulously styled. He felt a pang of longing, but it was quickly replaced by a wave of unease. This wasn't the Clara who spent her evenings in faded jeans, reading on the other side of the couch. This was someone else. And he knew, with a certainty that chilled him to the bone, that the distance between them wasn't just physical. Over the next 2 weeks, the little things began to accumulate, each one a tiny crack in the foundation of their life. Clara was working more, coming home later, her excuses as meticulously constructed as the historic homes she designed. She'd talk excitedly about a new client, a wealthy developer from Atlanta named Daniel, and the big project she had in the works. Ethan would nod along, but his mind would be elsewhere, replaying a fleeting moment from the morning, her phone left on the counter, the screen lighting up with a message notification from Daniel B., with a heart emoji next to his name. The physical distance grew. He'd reach for her hand, and she'd pull it away to check a text. He'd try to hold her at night, but she would turn away, her back a fortress of 100 small rejections. One Friday night, she came home after a supposed client dinner. The scent of expensive food clung to her, a rich aroma of seared scallops and fine wine, but her purse lay on the counter, a crumpled receipt from a high-end French restaurant inside. The bill for 2 people. He picked it up, his hand trembling slightly. He looked at the date and the time, a moment of profound clarity cutting through the fog of his denial. She'd said she was with her client and his wife. The receipt said otherwise. He put it back, his heart a frantic drum against his ribs. The world, which had felt so stable and predictable, was suddenly a fragile thing, balanced on a knife's edge. The receipt from the French restaurant felt like a ghost in the house, a phantom bill for a meal he hadn't shared. Ethan had hidden it in his desk drawer, a secret he couldn't bring himself to look at, yet couldn't bear to throw away. He went about his life, teaching his classes on the history of the Lowcountry, but the world had taken on a grayish tint. The vibrant colors of Charleston, the blooming azaleas, the pastel-colored houses, seemed muted, a cheap imitation of what they had been. He felt like he was watching his own life from a distance. One morning, while Clara was in the shower, the phone she'd become so possessive of vibrated on the kitchen counter. Ethan froze. He knew he shouldn't, but the temptation was a physical ache. He reached for it, his hand hovering over the screen. A new notification from Daniel B. popped up, thinking of you. Can't wait for Friday. His hand recoiled as if burned. He didn't need to read the message to understand. The heart emoji, the casual intimacy, the promise of a future Friday, it was all a language of a world he wasn't a part of. He felt a wave of nausea, a sudden and profound sense of being utterly alone in his own home. Later that afternoon, a delivery arrived. A small, elegant box from a high-end jewelry store on King Street. Clara opened it with a surprised smile, but the smile didn't reach her eyes. Inside, nestled on a velvet cushion, was a delicate silver bracelet. A simple, elegant chain with a small, circular charm. "Oh," she said, her voice a little too high. "It's from a client. A thank you gift for the project." "He has great taste," Ethan said, his voice flat, his gaze fixed on the bracelet. He'd never seen her wear anything like it. It was too modern, too sleek for her usual style. It looked like a token of affection, not a professional thank you. The next day, as he was putting away laundry, something fell from the pocket of one of Clara's coats. It was a single, silver cufflink. Intricate, with a small, stylized D engraved on the surface. It was a man's cufflink. He stood there, holding the cold metal, a profound sense of disbelief and dread washing over him. It wasn't a receipt, or a text message, or an unfamiliar piece of jewelry. This was a piece of another man's life, a small, intimate object left behind in a place it didn't belong. The realization hit him with the force of a physical blow. The lies, the late nights, the new perfume, the dinner receipt, the bracelet, they all fit together, forming a clear, undeniable picture. The quiet suspicion that had been gnawing at him had now become a cold, hard certainty. His life was a lie. The day after he found the cufflink, Ethan went about his routine with a chilling sense of purpose. He taught his classes, went for a run along the Battery, and even called his mother to talk about her upcoming doctor's appointment. Everything was normal, and that was the most terrifying thing of all. He was performing, a perfect pantomime of a man whose life was not crumbling around him. He planned a dinner for that night, just for the two of them. He chose their favorite Italian restaurant, a cozy place tucked away on a side street, the same place they had celebrated their 5th anniversary. He made the reservation with a sense of grim finality. Clara came home from work, a little late as usual, and found him dressed in a pressed shirt and slacks. "What's the occasion?" she asked, a flicker of suspicion in her eyes. "No occasion," he said, his voice level. "Just a nice dinner out. I made a reservation at Il Cortile." She hesitated, her phone clutched in her hand. "Oh. Okay. Let me just put some things away." The dinner was a slow, agonizing ballet of small talk and unspoken truths. They discussed his students, her new projects, the ridiculous heat. But the words were a flimsy shield, and the air between them was thick with what was left unsaid. He watched her across the table, the lamplight catching in her hair, and he felt a profound sense of loss, not of a person, but of a whole life he thought he had. He waited until after they had finished their meal, after the waiter had cleared the plates and brought their coffees. Then, with a quiet deliberation that made Clara finally look up at him, her eyes wide with a dawning fear, he began. "I was doing laundry yesterday," he started, his voice barely a whisper. "One of your coats." Something fell out of the pocket. He reached into his own pocket and placed the silver cufflink on the table between them. The small piece of metal looked impossibly small and insignificant, and yet it held the weight of their entire marriage. Clara's face went white. Her hand flew to her mouth, and her eyes, filled with panic, darted from the cufflink to his face. "Ethan, I can explain." He shook his head slowly. Don't lie to me. Not anymore." His voice was low and firm, without a trace of anger, which only made it more terrifying. I saw the text messages. I saw the receipt from the dinner for two. I found the bracelet you said was from a client. And I know who he is, Clara. Daniel. He's a new donor at the university. On the board, even. I know everything. The dam broke. Clara began to cry, a quiet, guttural sob that she tried to stifle. The veneer of her lies had been stripped away, and all that was left was a broken woman, caught in a truth she could no longer deny. The dramatic climax was here, but it was not loud or explosive. It was quiet, devastating, and final. Clara's sobs were the only sound in the quiet restaurant. The perfect, curated facade of their lives had shattered, leaving behind the ugly truth. Ethan watched her, but he felt nothing, no pity, no anger, just a hollow, cold certainty. He paid the bill, leaving a generous tip, the act of a man still clinging to a semblance of his old, decent life. Back at the house on Trad Street, the silence was absolute. Ethan led Clara to the living room and sat her down, the very space where she had taken the hushed phone call that started it all. He didn't raise his voice, and that was what truly broke her. I need you to listen, he said, his voice flat. Because this is the only time we will ever talk about this. He laid out his plan with the clinical precision of a man who had already grieved his marriage and was now planning its funeral. You will pack your things. You have 48 hours. I've already spoken with a lawyer. The divorce will be uncontested. You will not fight me on this. There is a detailed list of what you will take and what you will leave behind. He slid a manila folder across the coffee table. Inside were legal documents and a handwritten list. This house is mine. Everything in it is mine. You will take your personal effects and your car. Nothing else. Clara looked at him, tears streaming down her face. Ethan, please. We can fix this. I'm so sorry. No, he said, his eyes hard. You don't get to fix this. You chose. And now you have the consequences. I am a history professor, Clara. I know about consequences. You don't just erase the past. Then, he delivered the final, devastating blow. As for Daniel, he continued, a flicker of something close to satisfaction in his eyes, I've already started. I've sent an anonymous tip to the university board, detailing his unprofessional conduct with a professor's spouse. I have copies of the texts, the receipts, everything. He is a major donor, but the university's reputation is worth more than his money. And I've been a professor here for 10 years. My reputation is solid. His is about to be in tatters. Clara stared at him, her face a mask of shock and horror. You wouldn't, she whispered. You can't do that. I can, and I have, he said, a ghost of a smile touching his lips. You took my life. So I'm taking his. It's only fair. The conversation ended there. There was nothing left to say. Clara left 2 days later, not with a public fight or a dramatic scene, but in the quiet humiliation of a truth that could no longer be hidden. She drove away from the beautiful house she had helped design, leaving behind the life she had thrown away. Ethan was left alone in a house that felt both familiar and foreign, a quiet tomb for a marriage that was now a part of Charleston's long and complicated history. The final scene shows Ethan in his study, sitting at his desk, the space feeling empty now. He looks out the window, watching the setting sun cast long shadows over the city. The story ends not with a moment of catharsis, but with a lingering, profound sense of emptiness. The revenge was a cold satisfaction, but it had not filled the void she left behind.